Well, for me, the 1930s stuff was easy because I loved politics. I loved New York history. I love history in general, but I really love New York history.
All right, guys, welcome back. I have an award winning author today who has over 20 different books published. He's a cigar aficionado, which we're going to talk about. And of course, of course, he has a new novella coming out under a new imprint by some really, really good thriller gurus. We're going to talk about here in a little bit. So, Terrence McCauley, how are you?
I am doing just fine, my friend. Thanks for having me on the show.
Of course, yeah, man, and we got a lot to talk about, like I said, and off the air. But let's first start about like a little bit about who you are. How'd you get into writing?
Sure. I come from a long line of great storytellers from when I was a little kid. I had a lot of my uncles and aunts were in the Catholic clergy here in New York. So they met an interesting cross section of a lot of different people throughout their ministries. And they were school teachers, or one of my uncles was a chaplain in Bedford Hills Correctional State Facility for women. So it was there was always some interesting banter going back and forth at the holiday tables. And I also grew up as a classic movie fan. My parents were huge movie buffs. And so I grew up on weekends watching some of the classic films on Channel 13 here in New York with them. So I got an appreciation for quality storytelling from a very early age. And as I went through high school and college, I realized that I like telling my own kinds of stories. And I took a creative writing class in my junior or senior year. I can't remember now. It's been a while. And I enjoyed the rush I got in the workshops when I would get people's feedback. And people liked some of what I wrote. So I decided to keep with it after I graduated. I got a job in New York State government. I was in various places over 25 years. So you want to talk about getting material for some interesting stories? Politics and government is a pretty good place for that kind of
Sure
stuff.
is. It writes itself almost.
It certainly does. So I know you've got the military background, so you know it's you saw one side of it. I saw the civilian side of it, but I know between the two of us, we probably got a couple of war stories that have nothing to do with arms or conflicts or
Oh man,
armed combat or anything like that.
let me tell you. Now that I'm a civilian for the Air Force, and I've worked for a Space Force as a civilian when it was standing up, let me tell you about
Mm,
politics, man. Let me tell you about the politics. Everybody and their dad had an opinion about how the Space Force should be stood up and how it should work, and down to the littlest thing, like what they should call themselves, how things should be structured. Everybody had an opinion. Like it was ridiculous. I mean, delays were done because people were arguing about what that should go on the top of the letterhead. Like the
yeah.
dumbest stuff. The dumbest stuff.
Oh yeah, yeah, and I would imagine the logo, the insignias, all of that was probably points of concern because in my job, people used to fight about what bullet points each executive was going to have, whether it was an arrow, a diamond, whatever, fonts. I mean, it
Oh
was
yeah.
just
Oh yeah.
it was crazy. So then, but then I kept writing in my spare time while I was in New York State government, and then I also would write on the nights and weekends. And then I was lucky to win the True TV Search for the Next Great Crime Writer contest way back in 2008. And that's when I realized, after I beat out about 200 other novels for that award, I said, maybe I've got something here. I enjoy doing it. Let me take it a little bit more seriously. And so that was way back in 2008. And now we're here in 2024, and I've got about 30 novels under my belt at this point, both under my name and under ghostwritten series that I work for. So
Oh,
it's
okay.
been quite a journey. I've
Yeah.
written thrillers, I've written crime novels, which is the one that won the contest. It was set in 1930s New York. And then I have been writing westerns lately, which have been a interesting thing for a guy from the Bronx to do.
Did you find that I want to talk about the awards here in a minute. Did you find
Mhm.
that writing crime to be a little easier than writing westerns, given kind of your background and where you're from, or did the westerns kind of come naturally?
Sure. Well, for me, the 1930s stuff was easy because I loved politics. I loved New York history. I love history in general, but I really love New York history and delving into that era, not just relying on the Jimmy Cagney movies or the Edward C. Robertson uh, movies, the hats and gats, and they gun everybody down with a Tommy gun. It was doing my own research. I saw so many layers and so many wonderful parts of that era that are romantic but never even get into the uh, what they're never covered by the movies. So they were more complicated times. They were very political times, um, and a lot happened under the surface that if you just look a little bit, you'll be able to find. So I enjoyed writing those, but writing them first did prepare me to write for westerns, which was in that you have to make sure you get your details right. Otherwise, people who are aficionados of that era will jump all over you, and they've got a right to. Writing is art and it's wonderful, but it's also involves patrons, and the people who buy our stuff and read our stuff deserve to have it as accurate as possible. And it's my job as the writer to make sure I do that. So if when I was writing the crime novels in the 30s, for example, I made a point of never mentioning Capone except in passing, or Lucky Luciano, because the second they pop up, or Meyer Lansky or Bugsy Siegel, because when they show up in a story, they suck all the air out of the room. And it
Hmm.
would have been fun to write about them, but I didn't want my books, they weren't exactly high literature, but I also didn't want to shortchange the characters in my story for someone who's going to take all the spotlight. When I started writing the Western, instead of writing about historical characters, I had to make sure I got the details right, because the
Yeah.
same kinds of people who read Westerns are also the same kinds of people who read military fiction. And I
Yes.
know that a lot of the people who listen to your podcast are vets. A lot of the people who read, the people you have on here are vets. And you know what it's like when you go into a story and someone uses the wrong term for whether it's a clip or a magazine, something I've been guilty of, I will admit it. Or they use the wrong term for a tactic that you know is exactly wrong. They jump on it and they seize
Mhm.
on it, and sometimes they'll set the book aside. So writing westerns is, you have to make sure you get all of the parts right, including the armaments, what was available, because God forbid you mention a rifle that was not out until 1890 in a story that's in
Yeah.
1888.
Somebody will
That
catch it.
will Someone will catch it and they will make you pay for it. Even parts of the saddle, you have to know
Yeah.
that. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't have it memorized, but when I'm writing a western, I definitely have a diagram up on my screen in the background that I can go to, so I know what it is. So there's a lot of writing 1930s stuff, and any historical fiction really did prepare me for the westerns and to be detail oriented as I'm being creative.
Well, there's so much because I used to work out on a cattle ranch here, and
Mm,
there's so even in farming, in ranching, there's been a lot of advancements in technology and methods. A lot of methods that are still around today, and a lot of old schoolers still use. But there's still been a lot of advancements just in a pair of pliers that maybe weren't done back then, but they are today. They're
hmm
still pliers, but they're a different kind of pliers. Like that little slip up and can catch on somebody. And you're right. Um, to readers' credit, they are looking for that authenticity and those details, and I think that's perfectly fine. I really do. But
hmm
I don't think you should look so hard to maybe take away from the entertainment value of the story, or let it
Right.
ruin your because if you look at it like this, not everybody who reads a book is from the background that book is talking about. Some people read books for pure entertainment. So they don't
hmm
know that Glock doesn't make a certain caliber pistol. They don't necessarily
Right.
know that. There's certain people who do, like myself and you and other folks. But, you know, when people complain about that too much, I tend to go, you need to relax and enjoy the story, man, because that's what fiction is.
Yeah, it is.
It's
It's
made
it's
up.
storytelling at its heart. But it's funny, those people that pick up on those small problems are the ones that are going to be the most vocal about it, and that's what's going
Yes.
to tend to drive down your rating. But you're absolutely right about the creative stuff. I went to I've gone to several Western Writers of America events over the years, and a lot of those people are ranchers. They're
Yeah.
voracious readers, by the way, too. I mean, you think they just read cowboy books? There were some, and I'm not kidding, there were some really scarily brilliant people who are members of that organization that have a lot of experience. And I said, they asked, well, what are you watching on television? And I was kind of embarrassed. These are ranchers. I said, well, I love Yellowstone. Oh, I love Yellowstone too. It's fantastic. They went on and on about it. Kevin Costner's awesome. I said, is it realistic? And they said, hell no, but I still love it.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's the entertainment value. Like, it's a flattering entertainment value of it because it's not glorious. Farming and ranching
Oh,
is not glorious at all. And of course, Hollywood, does it up, but sometimes it's. Well, I like watching military stuff. I was in the military for 12 years. I still work for them. I love watching
mm-hmm.
military stuff, even when I can watch it on screen and know, like, well, that wouldn't happen. That's obviously made up. That's exaggerated. Blah blah blah. I still like it because it's a compliment to the services. It's a compliment to people who have served, saying, we want to copy what you did because we're jealous. It looks cool. Blah blah blah. So
Right.
it is kind of a compliment, and I think same thing for the ranchers. Yellowstone. Everybody loved Yellowstone. I didn't meet a whole lot of
Yeah.
people who didn't like it. I mean, Kevin Costner's Kevin Costner. How can you, if you don't like him? I don't know. You're not living right.
Yeah, they had great people. They had Cole Hauser on there, and all of the
Fantastic.
people who were in there were great. I think it's one of those shows that really overcame. And I love Taylor Sheridan, but especially in the first couple of seasons, there were big plot holes in it. And I think it was one of the first TV shows I've ever seen where the direction and the actors saved a script because they really pulled it off. You got so invested in them, you were able to look past the shortcomings that might be in the plot, and that's an added bonus that television has over something, and movies have over something that's written, because it's
It's
more
true.
static, it's more tactile. So it's something to keep in mind, that yeah, just because it worked on your favorite TV show, that you might be looking to mimic the style in a novel, it might not translate onto the page. It's two different media.
Let's talk about media. Speaking of
Mm-hmm.
media, for you, going all the way back to 2008, you've been award winner, just raking in the awards. Um, Here's some of them. Read them off your website. Search for the next great crime writer. Won that in
Mm-hmm.
2008. New Pulp Best Novel for Slow Burn, 2014. Best New Pulp Short Story for A Bullet's All It Takes. Winner for Best New Pulp Author Award. That's all in 2014, by the way. Just those three right there. And then
It
in
was a good year.
15, you won another one, Best Thriller Novel. 16, Best Short Stories at ITW, which is a really big deal. Um,
Mm-hmm.
2017, the Silver Medal for Historical Fiction. 2018, Best First Novel, and the Silver Spur Best Paperback Novel. 2019, Silver Spur Best Paperback Novel again. You've been crushing it. How has been like the feedback you've gotten from winning those awards? Because a lot of people are like, oh, do I try to get awards for my work? Will it actually lend credit to it? Will it give me any notoriety? What has been your feedback on the awards process? And of course, congratulations.
Oh, thank you, thank you. Yeah, I got the silver, the second place in a lot of those categories, but they were all important because there's validation for the artist whenever anybody loves what they're doing, and especially if there's an award. Now, if you have a chance to enroll in something, and like for BoucherCon or for MWA, I've been a judge for the MWA awards several times. I highly recommend you do it because it really is a democratic process. No one tells the judges, well, we want you to lean in this direction, or we want this kind of book this year. It doesn't work that way. You get so many books, you have to go through them, and you have to judge them accordingly. There were some places that charge a fee to enter. They're not necessarily disreputable, they're just usually smaller than some of the larger uh, contests and larger award ceremonies that
Yeah.
are out there for some of the bigger events. If you can swing it and you can do it, you can afford it financially, I always recommend, sure, submit to a couple, but don't go broke. Make sure you have a budget for this stuff even if you're an independent author, or even if you're a published author by one of the big five. Uh, Make sure you know what you're going to spend and stay within that limit. And if it means applying for a position, an award with one of the smaller venues, sure, have at it. But just if you don't get listed or you don't get nominated, don't get bummed, because there's a lot of people who enter these things, and sometimes even the best manuscripts get skipped. Sometimes they don't get noticed, and it's got nothing to do with the quality of your writing. A lot of times it has to do with volume. So my whole thing is keep it in perspective. Apply, but don't rest your hopes on it, and don't count on that validation, because you might not get it.
Hmm.
The feedback you get from beta readers, that I really recommend people find, that's what counts, because they put the time into reading your story.
How do you approach a new project? Do you
Um,
outline? Are you a pantser? How do you do that?
I do not outline. I have done it for submissions that I've done, but that's just the way I work. That's not, there is no golden rule about how you're supposed to do this.
Hmm.
The only golden rule is you do what you're comfortable with. And some people, they need to see the outline of the story before they can sit down and start putting things together. That's awesome. That's valid. If it works for you, it works for a lot of successful people I know, go at it. If But for me, I've always got ideas bouncing around in my head from people I've met back in 1996 all the way up until now. I wish my brain knew how to shut off sometimes. It doesn't. So there's always stuff rattling around up there. So when I form an idea based on what my agent tells me we should push. And so if it's a Western, okay, is it part of an existing series, or is it something that's a standalone? If it's a standalone, my brain kicks into a different section. All right, you can't use any of the stuff we've used before. Can't have Aaron Mackey. Can't have Jeremiah Halstead. It's got to be new. That's exciting in
Yeah.
some point, but also you can't rely on the crutch of taking something familiar that you've already created
Yeah.
and bringing it into this new stuff. But it always depends on what's asked of me. And in my ghostwriting stuff, there's always a parameter about what I can and cannot do. My name isn't on the cover, but I'm stoked when I see those books hit the bestseller lists, because then I say, "Oh, damn! Those people read something that I put together." And a lot of times they will give you a character Bible if there's an existing character, or they'll tell you these are the parameters that you can go through. You can't have cursing. You can't have too much sex in it. You can't have gore, violence, stuff like that. It can't be too explicit. And some writers find that limiting, but
Yeah.
for me, I find it challenging, because you're telling me, okay, I can't do this stuff. Let's see how far I can go without getting over the going over the boundary that they've set for me. And I think bouncing around between the genres as I have, it's definitely kept me sharp, because the way a Western that I write reads can't read the same way as one of my crime stories or my techno thrillers. It's totally different.
So, speaking of ghostwriting, for anybody who's maybe listening, who's thinking about getting into the writing and they're not sure, a lot of people think, well, in order to get into writing, your name's got to be on the cover. That's not the case. I've met a lot of ghostwriters. Um,
No, right.
what is maybe your biggest tip on people who want to get into writing, but maybe maybe their name's not going to be on the cover, and that's okay.
Yeah, my whole take on that is, if it's a reputable organization and they're around and you don't think that they're going to stiff you on the money that they promise you, you have to do it, especially if you're just starting out. I don't care if you've got 5 books on your hard drive and you've tried to sell them and you haven't gotten an agent, or you just haven't hit the right person in the right publishing house at the right time. If you can get your foot in the door and build up a portfolio of stuff that you were able to deliver on time, deliver well, doesn't even matter if your name's not on the cover. It's good experience for you, because then you get exposed to the business. Because a lot of writers, because we're creative people, right? We spend a lot of time in our own minds, and we come up with these conceptions of what the publishing business ought to be. And the publishing business
Yeah,
doesn't care what we think of it. It is the way it
it's
is.
true.
Now, it should change, maybe. Sure, there's an argument to be made for that. Are there things they could do better? Yeah. But you know what? You only need to worry about what's happening right now with that project that you put in front of them. And if you got a chance to do that as a ghostwriter, just make sure that they take care of you on the money side, and that they do as well by your product as you can. Because whether your name is on the cover or not, you're ultimately going to know that you wrote that, and it's going to be on your bookshelf. And when the bad stuff happens to you in this business, and it happens to everybody, I've gone through it. A lot of people I know have. Pull that down off the shelf and say, "Yeah, I wrote this," and you'd be surprised at how much that counts in some of the darker times.
Well, and you're kind of building a resume too.
Yeah,
New authors come along all the time, and there's people who want to write and need help, and that's what that is for, you know. So keeping your resume up to date, you never know when, you could get called up, kind of from the minor leagues to the big leagues type of thing. You get called up, say, hey, this guy needs help, as a project, an idea, blah, blah, blah. And the next thing you know, you're on a Zoom call doing your thing,
right.
you know?
Right. Yeah. And it's writer's right. And it sounds like a trope, and it sounds trite, but it's true. So any experience that you get, you're going to learn something. Whether it's about how the book business works, how they actually sell the book, how they market it, or the editing process. A lot of the stuff I've learned about the business has been from the ghostwriting, because I got to see, well, you can't do this. As I said before, you can't do that, but here's what we want you to accentuate. And then you learn how to tell a good story that way, one that sells, which should be important to everybody, especially if you're just starting out. You might not get there. You might have to self-publish. It doesn't have the embarrassment that used to be associated with it, thank God, because there's a
Yeah.
lot of self-published stuff out there. That's awesome. So yeah, I would say take any opportunity you can that comes your way. Just make sure they take care of you with the money, because you don't want to also get. You're not going to get a Ferrari or an island in the Bahamas by doing this, but you want to make sure that someone's that's saying, "Oh, well, you're doing it for exposure." Yeah, I can't pay the rent with exposure.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Well, let's switch it up for a second. I know you got a stogie right now. I know you're a cigar aficionado. I'm a big cigar guy too. What are you smoking tonight?
Right now, I am smoking an Upman Vintage Cameroon. I got it from J&R Tobacco for they had a 10 pack sale, so I figured I'd give them a shot. Upman is probably this is the brand right here. Upman is if you're a cigar smoker, no matter where you are in your palate, they've got something for everybody. It's always a solid double at least. I always recommend them to anybody who likes, and they have something for everyone: dark stuff, mild stuff. And I often smoke when I'm writing. It keeps my butt in the chair, and it keeps the old gears lubricated. So between that and coffee,
Yeah.
that's why I'm able to write as much as I do.
What's one of your favorite cigars?
Hmm. I would say right now, the Chupacabra by Esteban, and I can't remember the name right now, but he was, let me see if I still got it here. Those are fantastic. They have these little Pigale, Esteban Carrera.
Okay.
That's who it is. It's called the Chupacabra. It's got a little pigtail on the top of it. I think
I
they
think
call
I've
it the
heard of it.
Pigale.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really great smoke. I had one when I visited a bookstore in Stanton, Virginia, across the
Okay.
street from this place. There's a beautiful old time cigar shop, and they introduced me to it. And I bought a box or two since. They're really great stuff. That's probably about my favorite right now. But like I said, my Upman is usually my go-to.
There's an author by the name of Richard Maverick. He's a cigar guy, and me and him talk a lot. And he's made me a lot of good recommendations. I live in a small town, so we don't have a lot of stuff. I had to order a lot of things and bring it in and let it sit in the humidor for a bit. But I got a
Right.
Perdomo 20th anniversary that was really good with a cup of coffee.
Oh yeah, Perdomo. They're always fantastic. Yeah, I've got my Perdomo Reserve over there right now. I've still got a couple of those sticks left. Would you say that's your favorite right now, or do you tend to rotate?
I tend to rotate and try some new things. That one is readily available at my local grocery store. They kind of upped their inventory a little bit, and then I gave them some input. And
Right.
as long as I come back and buy a few every now and then, they keep those Perdomos on the shelf for me. Um,
Oh,
I,
cool.
I really like Drew Estate, so I've been trying a lot of
Oh
different Drew
yeah.
Estate stuff. They got a lot of good stuff.
They do.
I don't know. I'd say the Perdomo right now is maybe my go to favorite, just because it's available. It's smooth. I can enjoy it at night. I can enjoy it in the morning if the weather's nice and go sit outside with coffee. To me, it
Yep.
works well with whiskey. It works well with coffee. Not mad about it, you know.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's fantastic. Yeah, there's so many great smokes out there that you
Yeah.
can have for varying occasions, and there's like I said, there's something for everybody. There's the medium stuff, there's the light stuff, there's the heavy peppery stuff where you're going to need a glass of water after every puff. But
Yeah.
it's to each their own. You know.
Yeah. Did you find that did you find it took you a while to kind of find what you really liked and find the brands and the rappers that you really enjoyed, or was it something you kind of fell into quickly?
Yeah, I was fortunate enough that when I started smoking the cigars regularly, that I had a group of people that didn't have a particular favorite because back in the early 2000s there were some, but cigar popularity had dipped, so there wasn't as many companies out there
Mhm.
as you got right now. So they didn't really stick with one brand. They smoked cheap ones, and they smoked really expensive ones. So while I was hanging around with them, I got a sense of what I liked and didn't like. My gateway cigar to all of this was the Rocky Patel, one of their first, I think it was their 1990 year, but it wasn't 1990 when I smoked it. It was the early 2000s. And I was in Savannah, Georgia, and we were there on a vacation. And there was a cigar store right on along the riverfront there in downtown Savannah. And I went in and I asked the person, and still do this to this day. I'll say, "What's your favorite cigar that only you carry right now?" And the guy said, "Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you this Rocky Patel. I'm not charging you for it, but this box here, I'm going to put your name on it because tomorrow you're buying it from me. I just know it's that good."
Wow.
So I was in one of the green squares that they had in front of the hotel. I lit it up, smoked. I said, "Wow, I really love this." I went back in the next day, had my credit card out. He was on the phone. He didn't even get off the phone, and he had the post-it note on it, and it said Yankee. And he put it right in front of me. He took it off. He just said, "Give me your credit card," and then he gave it to me. He just knew I was going to be back for it. So, yeah, Rocky also has a lot of great different
Yeah.
flavors too. With Drew Estate, you were mentioning that earlier. They've got one called Deadwood. That is a flavored
Yes.
cigar. Fat Bottom Betty. I'm not a
Yeah.
big fan of flavored cigars normally, but that one is excellent. Drew Estates does everything well.
Yeah. I found that there's a couple of flavored cigars that I do like. But I think by smoking some flavored cigars, I actually kind of found some of the fillers and the wrappers and the sizes that I enjoyed. And then I went out and found cigars like those that weren't flavored, and I found that it was easier than I thought it would be to kind of find some of those same flavors. I was
Mm-hmm.
very fortunate. A couple years ago, I lived in Colorado Springs, and we had a cigar shop called the Stag Tobacconist there, and
Oh, okay.
they had this big store, and when you walked in they had a cash register right there, and then off to the left was the pipe shop, and they had a room with all the pipe tobaccos in a sitting room you could smoke and all that, and then off to the right they had a walk-in humidor, a massive one. We're talking like the size of a living room type of thing. It was huge, and there was
Mm-hmm.
a guy waiting for you when you walk through the door, and he just said, "What are you looking for?" And it was like, "Well, I'm looking for a mild smoke, dark wrapper, blah, blah, blah." You could tell him whatever you wanted to or as little as you wanted to. He'd walk around the store. "How many do you want? You want to do three, four, five?" And just pick out stuff. And I just found myself doing that. Like, I want a little bit of a coffee flavor this time. I
Right.
want that hit of molasses or that bourbony taste, the real creamy bourbony taste. And I got one for you. And he'd know exactly what to do. And he wasn't taking you over to the $15 cigars. He was saying, "This one's
Right.
six and this one's nine. This one's got this one." I mean, he knew what he was talking about,
Right.
and that helps
Right.
so much. I tried. I didn't have a bad cigar. I probably smoked 50 cigars while I was there in that year and a half.
Mm.
Not a bad one. Not a single bad one, because he knew what he was talking about. And I just that to me that was perfect.
Right. And it also too, I find that with cigar smokers, you get to understand who they are by what they smoke. In that, if they say, I only smoke Davidoffs or I only smoke Padron 26s. You're like, all right, but you're right. I know, yeah, you have obviously got money then. That's what you're trying to get me to realize. But
Yeah.
at the same time, you're robbing yourself of so many great sticks. And, you could spend $50 on 8 great sticks and find 4 of them that are awesome. And
Yep.
the others are great everyday smokes. You don't have to go broke doing this. And that's why it's great if you're
Yeah.
going to do it. You smoke them less than cigarettes. And it's great to be able to meet people too when you're doing something. I mean, we were in Tampa for VoucherCon several years ago, and I met a whole bunch of people that I'm still in touch with today just because they had a smoking area. We were out front smoking cigars. Some people were smoking cigarettes, and it was really communal. And people don't understand that about cigar smoking. It'd be a very social activity.
Yeah. Well, and it's like I found that it's like the bourbon and the whiskey guys. I'm a
Mm,
bourbon fan myself, but the best bottle of bourbon I ever had, I only paid like 25 bucks for. But there's some people out there that are like, I only drink Blanton's because it's $100 a bottle. And that's just, it's the best stuff. And I disagree.
yeah,
Again, the best bottle I ever had was like 25 bucks. It was great.
right,
You
right.
can't
You're
find it
paying
for
for it.
25 anymore because everybody else figured it out too.
Yeah, yeah, I know. You wind up paying for their success, but yeah, that's
Yeah.
you know what? If you enjoy it, you don't owe anyone an explanation. And chances are, I walked into a cigar golf club a couple of months ago with a bunch of buddies of mine, and I had a box of Upman with me, and the guy at the bar said, "Well, what are those?" And I said, "Oh, they're Mark Twain cigars." It was in the box, and he says, "Oh, I only smoke Davidoffs, but what are those like anyway?" And then I opened them up. He saw they were Upmans, and I gave him one. So it's just some people try to be posers when it comes to that kind of stuff, and it's just funny to watch them. It's like, dude, there's so much to choose from. Don't limit yourself. Just because you can afford it doesn't mean you should buy it.
I agree. I absolutely agree. Let's talk now about this new endeavor that you have coming out soon with
Hmm.
Silverback Publishing, the guys from Best Thriller Books. Chicago 63. It's a novella. You've done a novella
Right,
before, but this
right.
is kind of a new endeavor. How did this, first of all, how did it kind of come about?
Sure. Well, I've written several novellas, and I love the process of it. For your audience, I want to highlight that I wrote The Devil Dogs of Belle Wood several years ago. That's the one I won the silver medal for from the Military Writers Association of America, and all the proceeds from that. It's published by Down and Out Books. All the proceeds for that go directly to the Semper Fi Fund because I figured if I'm going to be writing about one of the best Marine battles ever, I'm going to make sure the proceeds go directly to them.
Nice.
But back, yeah. So that's a book that a lot of people have enjoyed. Actually, it's set in during the Battle of Belle Wood.
Okay.
So that's one. But then I fell in love with that format, so I continued on over the years. And sometimes you've got an idea for a novel, but then as you start writing it, you realize, you know what, this isn't enough for a full novel, but
Yeah.
it's still a really nice story that I want to tell. So I've been writing the beginning of what I hope is a planned trilogy called Dallas 63. And I have that set as a tale of the run up to the assassination, but told from a Dallas cop's perspective, the
Ooh.
Dallas detective's perspective. So you're not going to get the broad range of stuff that James Ellroy covered, for example, in the American Tabloid trilogy. Great book, but I didn't want to write that kind of book. I wanted it to be centered on Dallas with the players who were there in the months leading up to the assassination. And the second book is how they had turned Oswald into a police informant, and then he's been set up. So the protagonist has to try to rescue him. We know how that turned out. And then the third book talks about the chase for the people who got away with it and have fled Dallas. And this detective chases them. I was talking to James Apt over at BTB, and he was saying, well, it's a great idea, but you can understand why people are saying, well, 3 books, I don't know if it's going to happen. Also, the Kennedy stuff, people get a little bit squirrely about that, especially because they haven't released everything. So I
Yeah.
can understand it. But he
Yeah.
said, "Do you have something like an origin story for Dan Wilson, who's the main character in Dallas 63? Or do you have like something that you could do that's kind of related to it?" And I said, well, you know what? There was the plot in Chicago in 1963 to kill Kennedy. And he said, all right, well, why don't you give that a shot? So we were just BSing. We weren't talking about possibly publishing it. It
Mhm.
was me just trying to get attention for it. And the more I had already done a lot of the research on it, and it's a fascinating time. Much of what happened in Chicago, it actually did happen. It was about in early November 1963, November 2nd. Kennedy was going to go to the Army Air Force game, and there were people who were planning to shoot him as he took a slow turn off the freeway onto one of the local streets and drove to the game.
Mm.
One of the guys worked in a warehouse that was right next to where the slow turn was going to happen, and it was all laid out. And there were four Cubans. Two of them got arrested, but all four of them were ultimately released without charges or records.
Wow.
So when I saw that, I said, you know what, that does play a role in my book, and I wanted to make the main character a secondary character in my novel. But I said, you know, he's only going to be in it for the first half, and then there's nothing that happens after that. So
Yeah.
it's a great story, but it's going to take up too much room, and then the character disappears. So I can't do that, but I can turn it into a novella, and that's what I did. I encapsulate the plot. Dan Wilson does have a role in this as he alerts the main character, Abraham Golden, to what's happening. And Golden, who he starts to run down the details, and he uncovers the plot that ultimately really did take place in Chicago. It's based on a real life Secret Service agent who's named Abraham Bolden, not Golden as he is in my novel, but Bolden. He got in trouble because in 1964 he tried to bring this news of this plot to the Warren Commission, and they shot him down. They said, "Oh, it's ridiculous. There was no long-standing plot." But then Bolden wound up getting arrested for taking a bribe, and he spent 6 years in federal prison. So they ultimately got him in the end. In 2022, Joe Biden pardoned him, and he wrote a book called Echoes of Dealey Plaza. So, and he relates everything that he uncovered. Now, my novella is different in that if you read the accounts of it, there were like two or three Secret Service agents who, in real life, did what I have Golden do throughout the novel. But that's only because when you're talking about a conspiracy plot, and you've read enough of them, if you have too many people involved, the audience gets unfocused. They
Yeah.
lose the
Start
thread of
asking
it.
questions. How does this person link in? I don't understand. And that's the last thing you want.
Right. So what I did was I fictionalized the account, and I made Golden the main character. And in real life, in his own right, he's an interesting character. He was the first African American Secret Service agent on the President's Protection Detail. He was one of the best counterfeiting officers in the Secret Service. So I figured if I'm going to make the truth a dramatization, this is a solid character to do it with. And so that's where the whole idea for Chicago 63 came out.
So when does it hit shelves? When can we get it?
Right now, it's scheduled to be, we've got a pre publishing deal going on where we've got people who, if you, for the price of a little more than a hardcover, you get an advance copy of the book and you get a limited edition hardcover of the book. So that's incentive. Plus, we're doing a lot of content that are not necessarily behind the scenes, but where I interview people who have experience in this area, like Secret Service agents, people who are familiar with the tactics, people who are familiar with the assassination plots, who have done research on that. So what we're trying to do is create a package where, yeah, you get early copy of the book, you also get a hardback cover, and you get access before anyone else to all this cool information that we were able to pull together. And so that's what makes it different from a lot of other stuff that's being published today. It's something new, and the novella format is naturally shorter, and
Yeah.
we think it's going to start appealing to a lot more people.
I think so too. I think there's a lot of stories to be told in between these bigger stories, full blown books. I found myself in my writing coming up with good ideas and then saying I don't have enough depth to stretch this out to 300 plus pages without
Right,
forcing it. Could I trim it
right.
down to under 150? Because then that's a short novella. But I do think the bigger publishing houses, I don't know how they feel about novellas. So
I can't imagine that there's much in it for them, and I don't blame them.
no.
That's not a shot at them. There's a lot of different ways you can. There's a lot of different criticisms one could have, and that are constructive about publishing, but not publishing novellas, unless it's James Patterson or somebody who has a huge name. I don't blame them for not doing it. It's just like anthologies. Anthologies helped me tremendously, and
Hmm.
they still help a lot of writers who were starting out. And I encourage people to write short stories for them. But in terms of getting a big time publisher to publish an anthology that isn't, best mysteries of 2024 or whatever, they're not going to do it. And I can't honestly, from a fan perspective, I would, but knowing the business side of the house, I can understand why they don't.
Yeah, yeah, I can too. Well, so I'm looking forward to Chicago 63 coming out. That's a really big deal. It's coming out here in February, right?
February 13th at this point, and I think we're going to make that date. We got a great cover designed by Christian um, Storm, who's done a lot of stuff for Ocean View and other larger companies over the years. Peter Rozovsky, who you might know, who's like the dean of crime fiction, he did the proofreading for me, and we got a fantastic formatter. So we really put our best foot forward with this because we knew it was going to be the first and what we hope is going to be an ongoing endeavor. And we wanted to make sure that the people who invested in it got their money's worth and got a really great product.
Awesome. Well, the last big question I have for you is from Jeff Circles the Dossier. I know you're familiar with that.
Oh yeah.
Doing something different this year, and me and Jeff are kind of teaming up. Jeff and Jeff, I
Oh okay.
guess, and we're doing everybody that I have on the podcast. He is going to have on the dossier, and then he's going to save
Mm-hmm.
a question, and then I'm going to ask the question on here. A little cross promotion. So here's the question I have for you. It
Great.
says you've won a lot of awards for your writing over the past 10 years, but since winning the Silver Falchion Award at Killer
Falchion,
Nashville,
yeah.
Falchion, at Killer Nashville for Blood on the Trail, how have things changed for you, and did Hollywood call?
Oh God, yeah. I've had a couple of conversations with people in Hollywood, and if I have any word of advice for any aspiring writer or someone who's been out there for a while, it is a completely different world than
Hmm.
what we know. It's different than publishing. It is they you've had Tom Cruise attached to stuff that's fallen apart. So mere mortals like us, we have no sway over that.
Yeah.
It's something that you can't write your book towards saying, "Oh, if I do this, I know they're going to have to turn it into a movie." They don't have to do anything, and
Right.
often they don't. They look at everything completely different than we do. I always say that if someone says they want to turn your stuff into a movie, great. Let's talk about money first. And then I follow James Elroy's stuff advice when he says it's all fun and games until the check clears. And then once that happens, it's your project, baby. It's not mine.
Hmm.
So that's the best way to look at it because otherwise you drive yourself crazy trying to chase that Hollywood deal or whatever. If you know someone in the industry, I've known people who were married to movie producers that have never had their stuff turned into a movie. And you'd think that if it was that easy, it would happen for them,
Yeah.
but it hasn't. So, it's, yeah, I've had some conversations with people who've been interested in developing some things. I've worked a lot on, I'm not a screenwriter by any means, but I've definitely given it a shot. I've written a lot of treatments. So I've had people who were interested in, and even in the Westerns too. But I would always say to any writer, just know your lane and be happy about it, but don't pin your hopes on it because it's a whole other world.
All right. Last thing before I let you go. Tell
Sure,
people where they can find more about you, where they can follow you, sign up for the newsletter, and check out Chicago 63.
sure. You can definitely find more information on my website about Chicago 63 and also on the Silverback website. It's silverbackpublishing.com. And also for my website, it's terrencemccauley.com, Terrence, McCauley, McCauley.com, all of my books, all of my information is there. I'm on all the social media platforms except TikTok because I figure a 50-year-old guy's got no business being on a video platform like that. I'm not a big twerker, and I don't think anybody wants to see a bald-headed bastard like me smoking cigars for 20 seconds at a time. So I kind of skip that.
That's
I'm
fair.
on Instagram. I'm on Twitter, T McCauley underscore NYC. I'm on Facebook. I've got my own page and my fan page as well. And I encourage everybody if you find me on social media, link up. I follow back and check out my website. If you read the description of one of my books and you think it's for you, in my experience, people tend to like it. If you say, nah, it's not really my speed, after reading the synopsis, you're probably not going to like the book, and that's fine. I get that. But yeah, I enjoy doing it. I've been doing it for a while now, and I have every intention of continuing it.
Well, Terrence, thanks, man. I'm glad we finally got to do this. I'm a big fan. I'm pumped that you got the novella coming out with this
Thanks,
new
pal.
endeavor, and I'm looking forward to what you're doing. And are you going to be at BoucherCon this year?
I might. It's down in
Okay.
Nashville, I believe.
Yeah, I'm
So
going.
we were down in Nashville last year and loved it. Oh man, what a beautiful place that is. So yeah, might be doing Killer Nashville and might be doing BoucherCon. Well, depends on what the publishing gods have in store for me. So we'll see.
Well, good. Hopefully, we'll see each other then. Again, I wish you the best. Thanks again for coming on here, man, and best of luck with Chicago 63.
Thank you, pal. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.